you just need to love yourself?
Annoying. I do experience that as annoying.
I just want to invite you into the room to say how you like really feel. And I want you to know that like I care about you and I care about this process. Like I want to honor this process.
I experience so much frustration being missed all the time. I experience attunement misses all the time, and I find myself very frustrated about that all the time.
The Big Hormone Enneagram.
I'm John Lekovich, 415, sexual self-pres, 458 trifix.
I'm David Gray, self-pres sexual, 9 with 1 wing, 974 trifix.
What up, it's Emeka. I'm an 8-wing 7, sexual self-pres with 854 fixes.
Hi, I'm Alexandra. I'm a social self-preservation 9-wing 1, 963 trifix.
Like and subscribe on Apple and Spotify, and leave us a review. If you want to support the show with a donation, you can find us on Venmo at Big Hormone and paypal.me/Big Hormone. All right, welcome back, everybody, to the Big Hormone Enneagram Show. We have 2 individuals here with us today. We have a special episode. We're looking at threes. We're looking at 3-wing 2 versus 3-wing 4. We've been exploring the differences between these 2 wings for the last, we're starting to. And I was hoping a conversation between these 2 fine-looking gentlemen would be interesting to tease out the differences between these wings. So I have JOSHXLOUIS and Louis. I don't know how to say your last name.
Yeah, it's good.
Ooh, the first gaze miss of the day, or maybe the second or third. I don't know.
I wasn't gonna butcher it. I didn't want to butcher it.
Yeah.
You said how do you say
Crom says Louis, and you can't say my last name.
Louis, yeah.
I know
Josh and
she
Louis,
says it,
yeah.
and I'm like, he probably doesn't like that. Probably.
It's okay. Yeah. From her, it's okay.
Okay. And
Scuderi. Yeah.
Scuderi. All right. So it's late last year, we realized that Josh is 3-wing 2 and versus 3-wing 4, and at the zone that we had, I think you were exploring that, conversing with Louis, and so I at some point you realized that you do have a 2-wing, and I just be interesting to see what comes up as you guys talk to each other. I'm sure you guys have had lots of conversations, so to bring some of that here and to tease out some of these differences, I have questions for you guys you can look at, but I just want to see what happens when 2 3s with different wings and pretty much the exact same typing to talk to each other. Introduce yourselves, say your full typing, where people can find you, any of that stuff.
I'm Louis. I'm a SOSP 3-wing 4, 396. I have my hands all over this Enneagram group, but there's not really a place you can specifically find me. But
yeah,
there might be at some point.
Okay. Hello, I'm JOSHXLOUIS. I'm a social self-pres 3-wing 2, 396. And you can find me at, theenneagramschool.com. Also have a podcast called What It's Like to Be You, where I interview people about their Enneagram type, and also new interviews coming out that are not about specific Enneagram types, but are about modalities of inner work. So I'm interviewing practitioners of different ways of working with yourself. What else? I coach founders and investors and stuff like that, and other people. That's it.
All right. I guess I really want you guys to start with the team. Okay, at the zone, there was a conversation happening between Louis and the 3-wing 2 fixers in the room about the role that
like one on 4
kind of thing that was happening, and the sort of like team love thing emerged from that. And just to set up the conversation, I hope you guys start there, and I hope there's friction, and I hope you kind of tease out the friction that was happening that day. Like, if that happens now, that's great. Like, I just want to hear the contrast.
Cool.
I'll see you guys later.
Oh, thank God everyone's gone.
Yeah, that was a lot. It's taking up a lot of space.
Just kidding. sort of. So, I think Emika's suggestion is a good idea in terms of a place to start. Not necessarily like we could work up to the team love versus team truth. Maybe would be a way to put it.
Team truth.
Team truth.
Yeah. That's good recall of what was happening there.
But maybe I'll say. So before that weekend, I had already been doing a lot of processing about having a two-wing before I met you. And then when I met you, a lot of what I had been thinking about came together because of the contrast that I experienced with you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think meeting you was probably the thing that like really was like, okay, yeah, I get it. I have a two-wing. And I would say there's a couple things that I noticed about you that were in contrast to me that were, I'll just name them here, but then I think it'd be useful to back up and say like some of the stuff that I had been processing, and then we can kind of use that as an entry point.
Sounds good. Yeah.
Yeah. One thing that I particularly noticed about you was how comfortable you are, how do I say it? Rudely dismissing other people's points.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And there were a couple things that you did as we were kind of settling into the evening, and here's my sense of you, of like your kind of social journey through that weekend was like you started kind of, I guess, shy, kind of on the fringes of the group, and we're kind of like finding your place. And I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but that was my sense.
A little shell shocked to jump into it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. This is how my nervous system is structured. I was like aware of your kind of social distance from the group, or I was kind of tracking, I guess, your experience. I was also interested in you as a three as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so then that night when my recollection is like so we sort of were on the couch, right? And I started lobbing questions over at you to just kind of, I had an agenda.
Invite me in.
Yeah.
What was the agenda? Okay.
My agenda was, I was like, Lewis has been pretty quiet. We recorded the podcast and you were kind of off camera for the whole thing. And then after that was when we started moving into the like rest of the evening.
Yes.
But sort of there you were on the couch, and my agenda was to start asking you questions to draw you out, basically. But I was kind of like, let's see, giving myself permission to just be a little, I don't know, socially obnoxious, or like to put a spotlight on you, you know?
Yeah. Prodding.
And prodding. Yeah, it was kind of like poking a hermit crab, you know, to see what it would do.
Yeah.
But all these questions were about like, tell me about yourself. Tell me like what's your relationship with your profession? Why did you become a therapist? And what's your orientation to therapy and all that kind of stuff. And it was both for my own personal curiosity, but also just like I'm curious about you as a person and why you were here. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And what came out from that was you were describing a lot of your philosophy about how, from your point of view, psychoanalysis and therapy is about something like exposing truth or facing truth.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what started the whole dynamic between Sarah, who's also in the room, who's a therapist, and the whole team love dynamic where Ikram also got involved. Love versus truth. And that friction started there. But the thing that I particularly noticed about you that I was like, oh, that's different from me in terms of 3-wing 2 versus 3-wing 4 is when Sarah brought up counterpoints about how important it is to be loving, you were willing to just dismiss those comments outright, or to kind of fire back darts that I experienced as like aggressive. I was like, whoa, I don't think that I would ever do that to a person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's interesting. I think I experience it as aggressive in its own way, but I think it kind of feels good. It feels cathartic. It feels like, obviously, like in line with what the conversation was about. Like, I'm interested in the truth, and it feels like the way that that's conveyed doesn't really matter that much. And I think I have very little patience having conversations about ideas with anyone from having a series of bad experiences with it.
Yeah.
And having this whole theoretical understanding, which is related to that conversation of just like people not being able to communicate with each other and have like some meaningful exchange on a more intellectual, conceptual level, because people's emotional sensitivities come into play and things kind of fall apart. So part of it is just like, okay, this is happening. This kind of conversation is happening now. I'm being prodded, and that's bothering me. And people are pushing back on me. That's bothering me. I feel really confident in what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So, and I'm getting myself to a place where I'm actually saying it, which is kind of takes a lot, which shows like the 3-wing-2 skill at kind of like getting people to open up and asking the right questions.
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah, I got to a point where I started expressing my worldview or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
And I just felt like what I was saying was true. So it just felt like it didn't really matter. And I felt like it's the experience itself is kind of hazy at this point.
Okay.
But I think I also felt kind of ganged up on, and like I had to defend myself because that was what was happening.
Yeah.
But yeah, it felt like, the people in the room, like they didn't really know what they were talking about. Like I was trying to offer my opinion and expertise on these subjects. So I'm just like doing that. And I think there's also an image piece of just like, I want to come off as the smartest person in the room. I want to come off as the most knowledgeable, and also come off as just like, I'm not going to like lower myself to try and meet you halfway.
Yeah.
Because I don't really believe there is a halfway point, and it feels like I'm compromising on my own self-integrity to do that.
Right. I see.
Yeah.
That moment of, I mean, that's a pretty interesting moment for a lot of reasons. I mean, my agenda to draw you out has a 2-wing-ish flavor. I mean, let me take you even further backstage about that. Like I had this sense of, I was like, oh, here's this person who's new, who my read on you, you tell me if I'm right or wrong, but my read on you was that you were feeling shy, and like there wasn't a clear opening to become more socially integrated. And and I was like, oh, well, I can create that opening. And so so that's what I did. But let's see, I did it in a way that was this sounds more aggressive than it actually is, but trying to get you to reveal yourself, but like the intention was this, like you could call it like a positive, social, integrative, like invitational sensibility, and like I really reflected after the weekend. Like people kept saying to me that I had this host energy, and I was like, what are people talking about? I don't know what people are talking about. And now I see it very clearly. And actually I like that about myself, that I provide that kind of a thing. It's like I feel like myself when I'm doing it,
Yeah.
But yeah, I had this sense of like, all right, let me orchestrate a social moment where Lewis can become more integrated into the group. And so my way of doing it was like lobbing questions at you, and then taking up social space, and then drawing eyes to our conversational dynamic, and then other people start kind of drawing, moving into that social center of gravity. And actually, here's something interesting too. I remember that the types that were not social were pretty bored by our conversation. I don't know. Do you remember that?
Yeah. Yeah. At the point you're making about wanting to have a conversation and kind of wanting to draw attention toward the conversation is really good.
Yeah.
I think that's not something that I was in touch with at the time, but was definitely happening. Like there's definitely something about having an audience to this conversation that was affecting things and was probably making me amp up more.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I could tell that it was like a little bit ruffling you, but at the same time, I also kind of sensed that you were liking it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I feel very comfortable. Yeah, in that kind of like confrontation. Yeah, an argument.
In a certain way, it was like, okay, what I was reading about you in those moments was like, okay, this is the kind of person who likes to flex his expertise, and so giving you a situation in which you could do that was sort of, you could call it the 3-wing-2 social gift that I was trying to provide. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And I think you were right on point with that. Like I do want to flex my expertise, so that was a nice invitation. But the kind of response that I get in relationship to my expertise doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel congruent. So there's the frustration piece. And
Right.
once that starts getting kicked up, I'm just gonna start like bulldozing and diminishing everyone around me who's saying
Right.
things that they don't feel like they're not listening to me, or it just doesn't feel like we're on the same like conversational level.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah. And just about the kind of you pulling me in isn't the right, maybe that's how I experienced it. So that's the right word.
Mhm.
I think one of the reasons why I reacted negatively to it was because something that I'm doing is looking for kind of like subtle angles of asserting myself into a dynamic.
Sure.
And it's something that feels very like strategic and controlled for me.
Uh-huh.
And it felt like, I was in this process of trying to find ways to, kind of like push against the group or the people in order to distinguish myself.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of my process, right?
Yeah.
So being kind of just sucked in and having to
Uh-huh.
kind of meet you halfway or something like that, not feel
Sure,
that
yeah.
sense of control.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
that got me kind of ruffled up.
Okay, yeah. That makes total sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Check.
But I
Yeah,
think that points to
yeah.
a 3-wing 4 versus 3-wing 2 thing about kind
Right.
of the more, kind of looking to distinguish oneself from a distance in a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot about that. I mean, it's like, okay, 3-wing 4 and social self-pres, like that kind of the imperious distance thing.
Mm-hmm.
Can we get into the actual philosophical distinction though? Like the truth versus love thing?
Really, you want to go back to the philosophy? Sure.
Let's just see if there's anything there, because
All right, I'll see if I can
bet
keep
there
it
is.
under control.
Okay, or whatever.
Yeah.
So what I remember from the situation was that your philosophy about psychotherapy is that it is shepherding a process where someone confronts more and more of their own truth, or actually truth itself, capital T truth, objective truth, or something like that. And I'd love to hear you talk about what that means. And then the counterpoint was like, yeah, but you have to do that in a loving way. That was like the team love stance, or like your love for the person creates the relational container in which that's possible. But your pushback was like, yeah, but sometimes truth is harsh, or something like that. So that was part of the dance and the friction, at least as I see it. Yeah. Does that ring true for you? And does that still feel like a friction point?
A friction point, just
philosophically?
Not necessarily. Yeah. I feel like a big part of psychotherapy to me is about facing the truth. And in order to be able to do that, usually requires some kind of building up of strength and courage such that it can be experienced and tolerated.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously there does have to be some like connection, some trust, some rapport to be able to like help someone do that and feel like,
right.
You can offer some kind of I don't know, like auxiliary ego or something
right
to them. But it's funny, I just don't think of offering love as what I'm doing. It might be received that way. Maybe that's what matters.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not like, I'm just a blank slate that to be projected on, right? And I'm just going to kind of reflect, just give you some mirroring as if my subjectivity isn't at play at all in the room.
Mm-hmm.
But I think with the love thing, it's like some people need love in this more direct manifestation, and some people don't. They need something else. Some people, at least as far as I'm understanding, like the definition of love, or the definition of love as it was coming up in that conversation, like a lot of people would find that intrusive. I would find it intrusive.
What was the definition of love as it was coming up?
I guess I don't really know, but it seemed like it was something about what I'm assuming is just like showing like care in this a more like conventional and obvious way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, I think this is hard for me because this is where kind of the limits of my experience come up. But I'm imagining like the warm therapist, right? Who's like, okay, like I just want to invite you into the room to say how you like really feel, and I want you to know that like I care about you and I care about this process. Like I want to honor this process, right? That's what I imagine is like the therapist who's kind of embodying and trying to bring love into the space and into the relationship in order to encourage
Mm-hmm.
the process, encourage the patient to feel comfortable and to talk about whatever, reveal
Yeah.
themselves in
Yeah.
a way they normally wouldn't without that.
How do you feel about the Carl Rogers unconditional positive regard thing?
My understanding of that is that like you're seeing like the patient as like a good person at all times, basically.
Yes.
Yeah.
And his point is that you're seeing them that way is the fundamental thing underpinning the whole therapeutic process.
Yeah. Right. It's kind of like offering them 3-wing-2 gaze, essentially.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't agree with that because I don't think everyone responds well to unconditional positive regard.
Mm-hmm.
For example, someone who really hates themselves,
Uh-huh.
they might just be like, yeah, this person is just not seeing me.
Right.
Like
Okay.
what I need to bring here is like the part of myself that I hate, the part of myself that I feel like doesn't deserve
Mm-hmm.
unconditional positive regard.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it feels like being related to in that way creates this expectation that I'm going to like show certain parts of myself that I feel like are worthy to kind of to get that self-regard or to kind of keep that going.
Mm-hmm.
That's one possibility. I think another possibility is that maybe I'm just repeating the same thing, but it feels like there is a demand in the unconditional positive regard of like, it's not let's interact in a more positive way, but it's, I guess I do see it as kind of putting a ceiling on how much negativity can be experienced.
Wow. Yeah. Okay.
I realize that's kind of vague. I'd have to go into that more.
No,
But-
I hear what you're saying. Well, my counterpoint is like I feel like depending on the application or the skill of the person who's holding the space,
Sure.
one's expression of unconditional positive regard could either limit or expand the other person's capacity to experience their negativity or self-hatred, for example. I'm thinking about the okay, so the point you just made. Have you seen Breaking Bad?
Not really. Yeah.
Okay.
Like a little bit.
All
When
right,
it was actually airing. Yeah.
Right. It's I just watched it recently, so it's fresh for me. And it is actually fucking incredible. But your point made me think of this one moment where okay, there's this character named Jesse, and in one of the later seasons, he is really, really struggling with hating himself for really shitty things he's done, including like kill a person. And he goes to this support group, like a meth head kind of support group. And the person who's the facilitator running the support group is this kind of unconditional positive regard kind of a person, And he's like, he tells the story of killing a dog. He's like, I fucking killed this dog. And it's a metaphor. He actually killed a person, but he killed this dog. A lot of the other group members are like, wow, you're a terrible person. And the facilitator insists on being like, yeah, but you should still love yourself. And Jesse comes back with, well, what if I don't love myself?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And it's like, it's the exact situation I think you're talking about. It's like, yeah, sometimes a person needs to actually experience and like sit with their own self-judgment as a process of genuine remorse, which activates the transformation process,
Yeah.
And if a person is kind of being uncalibrated and just saccharine and like, yeah, but you're a great person underneath all that anyway, then obviously that would backfire because it's not attunement. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Yeah. Here's what I think is that I think that because you have a 4-wing,
Oh, okay.
I think that you are reflexively skeptical of expressions of love because they seem often overly saccharine and just not genuine on some level. Like there's something that's not actually resonating with that. The person offering it is not actually resonating with themselves or offering it from a sincere place, or they're kind of performing to a standard of like, I need to be loving. That is an actual relational miss. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's
Yeah.
good. That is my experience of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think for me, it's like if someone is, seeing me for who I am, like they're not going to do this,
Mhm.
right? They're
Right,
not
that's
gonna
right.
Try and
Yes.
interact with me in this way.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, okay, the mirroring that I'm not wanting to get is happening immediately, and that kind of kicks up the frustration process.
Totally. Yeah.
And yeah, I guess you could look at the whole conversation as like just throwing for philosophy. It's like competition, whatever, war of all against all, can't trust people. But to go back to the unconditional positive regard thing, when it comes to therapy, I do think something that's important is for the therapist to like be a person and to be seen as a person.
Yeah.
And right, part of being a person is that like sometimes you love someone and sometimes you hate them.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And you have all kinds of different feelings about them.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels like even if you're not saying like I hate you right now,
Mm-hmm.
like you're really bothering me right now.
Yeah.
But just being able to actually like have those feelings and contain them,
Mm-hmm.
I do think that has some value and actually does make a difference
Mm-hmm.
in the efficacy of the therapy.
Yes. Yeah.
And of just like what kind of content's coming up. There's that, and maybe this is the same thing again, but it's just like people are I am, because my forewing, but I think generally speaking, really sensitive to how much negativity can be tolerated, how much space they have to bring in the worst parts of themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just like how capable who they're with is able to not have some reaction to that, whether it be just kind of like retaliating,
Mm-hmm.
or it'd be like you just need to love yourself.
Yeah.
Or like I'm gonna kind of turn this around and do some positive reframe or kind of make some loving gesture that's gonna kind of get the vibe up.
Yes.
You know?
Right.
Yeah. I definitely probably pull for negativity in my work because it feels like that's home for me. Like I feel more comfortable in that than I do in whatever some more positive, kind of
Mm-hmm.
obvious loving place.
Okay, this is sort of on that point. So in my coaching, I also have, I would say, a bias towards helping people confront the things about them that are in their shadow. And you could call that a bias towards negativity. But the container that I set, like the relational container in which the other person isn't being invited to explore their shadow, is one of kind of, I'm letting them know that it's okay and that I'm not judging them for it. You know what I'm saying? And I think that the team love point of view is like, if you can create that undergirding, then it makes it more psychologically safe to explore that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that there is actually here's the thing. It's like, let's see, maybe I'm actually noticing in this moment, I think that I might be amping up a friction between this like love versus truth thing because of the prompt that we've been given. I don't actually see them as fundamentally.
No, I don't either. I think it's
at
very
friction. You know what I'm saying?
No,
yeah,
definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that a person can't grow unless they actually confront their truth, and also that the container in which one is more likely to confront truth is one of love.
Agreed.
But they don't negate each other. I will say one of the things that I've realized that I find myself frustrated with for in general, and aspects like those of us in our friend group that have a lot of for influence, is the skepticism towards love that I experience as like annoying. I do experience that as annoying because see how to put this. I think that the 4 inner position is that if I don't think that you're being real, like if you're I think the 4 thing is just there's such an incredible sensitivity to whether or not a person is actually being real, emotionally real. And there's this way that it's like if I'm saying I love you, I care about you, or if I'm just generally being warm, there is a reflexive skepticism or kind of repulsion in 4 that is basically like a test. Like, is that real? And it's basically 4 starts from the point of view of like that. There's no way that's real. That's not real because it's not negative, you know. And there's a bias towards negativity in that. It's like with people that I experience as having a lot of 4. It's like there's some way that I have to show them that I'm willing to go negative. I'm willing to acknowledge my own negativity or that there is negative shit in the world before they're willing to accept the warmth that I may actually have for them. But what I feel sometimes missed about as a person with a 2 influence is like a lot of times my love actually is sincere. You know what I mean? It's I don't know. Another way to put it is like I can feel sometimes like nervous that my love won't be accepted. It's like there's a kind of like, how do I say this? It's like
is it a rejection piece about
it's a rejection piece.
Like
it's
making the offering, and it not being accepted.
That's it.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. But it feels like the offering is myself, you know. That's probably true of all the rejection types, but it's like I
don't think it has
warm,
a certain flavor
you know?
for 3, right? Where there's like it's tied up in identity.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
This could be the reason that I thought I had a 4 wing for so long is because I experienced so much frustration with being missed all the time. You know, like I experience attunement misses all the time, and I find myself very frustrated about that all the time. But what I've been unpacking is that a lot of my frustration comes from, this is not always true, but some of the time it comes from not having a willing receiver, you know, of what I'm trying to give.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that seems right. Yeah, I'm trying to think of how that shows up in me. I think, it feels like I'm less with the 4 wing, like I'm less sensitive to those misses because I don't expect any kind of meeting around, like, not just around love, but around any kind of shared emotional connection.
Yeah, right.
So that like it just feels like, okay, if that's my starting place, I'm not gonna feel as hurt when not necessarily love, but just when there's any kind of miss. I do think, you know, maybe this is a 3 wing 4 kind of just like untouchable, you know, separate thing. Or just feels like, coming from the assumption that there's just not a connection is not going to happen here on basically any level.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm just gonna do this like distant, steely image thing.
Right.
And, you know, you can take it or leave it. I don't really care.
Right. But don't you want it deep down?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely want it deep down. Yeah. I mean, of course, as a 3, there's a huge sensitivity into like how I'm being perceived and wanting to be seen in a certain way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I watched your 4 wing 3, 3 wing 4 thing with Joseph, and I thought it was very good. And I was fascinated when you guys pulled up your collages and the collages of the predator eyes.
Yeah.
And I mean, that one in particular was like, whoa, oh man, that was crazy to me. Because and actually, when we were watching that nature documentary, you said something that like you typically identify with the predator, you know, the one doing the killing. Yeah. Not
the sexual predator.
We're talking. Yeah. A little quick image, you know, correction there. Yeah. We were watching a nature documentary about lions, and there was this. Remember that incredible scene that mama lion took down that.
That was crazy.
Whatever long neck man, and it was like an insane thing. Yeah. But yeah, so is that a true thing that you typically, when you watch nature documentaries, you identify with the killer, not the prey?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Will you say more about that?
I think what Akram says about lions being image types is interesting, and maybe she's onto something with that. Aesthetically, I find predators more appealing. Like I just think they look better, and it feels like predators have a certain like swagger and image knowing or something like that they are the apex.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a confidence that comes from that, and there's
Yeah.
a capacity to tolerate being isolated.
Mm-hmm.
And there's an awareness of the stakes in what they're up to.
Mm-hmm.
Where like in the documentary, it's like these people, like they're going to starve to death if they don't eat soon. So like the stakes are as high as they could be, and
Mhm.
they need to make it happen in whatever way they can. And what else? I think there's also something about being able to size people up in a way that feels effortless and instinctual that I would associate with predators. And I remember saying this when watching the show, and I still feel that way, where it's just like the predators just have like swagger.
Yeah.
Like they just have this like effortless confidence.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like even when the lions are dying and sick, like they still feel imposing, and they're still at an image level. You're receiving them as imposing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you know whatever how you're seeing them, and the prey just have like no swagger. Like they just look kind of like bad. They look like they look bad. They look scared, kind of lost. It feels like the prey is more of a victim to their instincts than the predators for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
Like because a lot of them are just in these massive herds trying to protect themselves by hiding behind other people or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think it feels like being a prey animal. That's not true. I don't want to say it takes less skill, because that's not true. But the ones that were in this documentary, it just seemed like they were less skillful than the predators.
Yeah. Do you when you like you're in that situation of watching a nature documentary and you're watching a lion kill another animal, are you experiencing any empathic reaction for the prey?
I have to think about it, yeah, to experience the empathy. Like I have to think like, okay, like this animal is like just got attacked. It got to the point where it got brought to the ground. It's still alive, and this like predator is literally like eating it alive.
Yeah,
it's probably going to take a long time for it to die. Like that sounds pretty horrible. Like that's really horrible to imagine.
Right.
But the actual experience of the kill, like I get a real adrenaline rush around that. Like I find that really satisfying. Yeah.
But you're not instinctually being like, oh my God, that poor thing. Or something. No,
definitely not. Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely. Yeah. The identification is in the opposite direction.
Right. And you have to think your way into that place of like, oh, I can a feeling for that, for the prey.
Yeah. It takes that's right.
And it comes from, I mean, let's see, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like you kind of judge the prey for just being a doofus, like for just being, like it's not excellent enough, not skilled enough. It's not a master of its own self as much,
Right. Yeah.
Like
and it also feels like there's just, could have done better. Yeah. And it just feels like it's some kind of reflexive image thing where it's just like, they're not aware of their own image. Like they're not aware of how bad they look. Or something like that.
Sure.
It's not that. It's not that. That's not. There's not some expectation that they be aware of their image, but just like on an image level, it just feels like it just doesn't look good.
Yeah.
Yeah. It just doesn't. Yeah. I don't know. Like I just don't like them. I don't like how they look. I don't like their vibe.
So funny. I
was not expecting to talk about this in such detail.
Yeah. Well, when I watch nature documentaries, I do have a reflexive, like, oh, that poor thing for the prey. And let's see, my genuine experiences, I have both an admiration for the kind of the glory and the swagger of the predator, and also there's a certain like cuteness and inestimable worth of all life forms. And so like, and I can see, I just, I put it this way, put any animal in front of me, I can find a way to love that thing.
Right.
You know, and it's not hard for me. It's not hard for me to love it. Yeah, and so I don't know. I don't know that I'm identifying with the prey. I mean, my instinctual reaction is like, oh, that poor thing. But here's the thing: is like I was thinking about like after I watched your thing with Joseph, and you had this collage with all these predator eyes, and it was like I was like, oh wow, there's like a real like salient and ever present aspect of your identity that is identifying with this kind of like killer or like apex predator kind of like sensibility, whether or not you see yourself as a killer, you know what I mean? But like, and there are oftentimes just as a 3, I mean, I want to be excellent. I want to be an apex performer, predator, whatever, but I don't see myself as necessarily a killer, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But except in the right situations, I would want to be perceived that way by other people who value that thing. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Or like if I'm playing basketball, for example, you know, I want to be able to access and turn on a sense of like, all right, I'm fucking in this, like no mercy kind of thing. But at the same time, if my opponent falls down, my reflex is to offer them an arm to help them up and not to be like, you know, fuck you.
Like walk over them.
Walk over them. Exactly. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So I guess maybe the final thing to say about that, it's like there are moments when I want to summon myself to experience myself as an apex predator from an image point of view. And I want to be able to like flip that switch in myself.
Right.
But it's not necessarily default in the way that it is for you.
Yeah.
You know, I'm much more of like a host energy, I guess is the way to put it.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, and I think the response, okay, I'm not going to do this predator prey thing anymore. I'm kind of tired of it. But
okay, that's fine. Yeah.
But like what the emotional response that you're describing that you have to the prey.
Yeah.
The more like sympathy and more I guess it's like seeing them as cute and vulnerable, but especially cute. I think there's something about that, the kind of like the cutesy aesthetic and energy that's like very, very anti 3-wing-4.
Okay. Let me do this at a different angle. So like I've started to play basketball again recently, and I love basketball. And like 2 days ago, I went and I was playing at this. Okay, there's this clinic. It's called Never Too Late, and it's like, hey, do you wish that you got better basketball coaching when you were a kid? Come to our clinic and we'll coach you up, you know. And so it's like a bunch of 30 and 40 something, you know, New Yorkers that are like that meet at like high school gyms, and there's a coach, and he has us run plays, and then we scrimmage and stuff like that. But so I showed up at this thing, and we're assigned teams, and my team sucked. And
okay,
so my team was very bad, and my reflex was to basically become the leader by like we would get knocked out of a round, and then we're on the sidelines, and then I would kind of like go to each person and be like, all right, like where do you want the ball? Like, do you like to shoot? Do you like to drive? I find myself kind of like, okay, what kind of a player are you? Cool. Don't be afraid to drive, you know? And I'm like, I start facilitating this teamness, you know, and I'm creating more connection between me and this other person, and also between other people. I'm getting us to start talking, and miraculously we got better over the course of about an hour, and then we started winning. So that's like, put it this, I like that about myself. I like that I can activate that kind of leader mode and start facilitating connections and getting people to wake up by virtue of connecting with them, you know?
Right.
And it's like I see you, man. Like don't disappear on me. That's kind of what I'm saying.
Right.
Yeah.
That's something that I can relate to and definitely can do. But I start from the place of not trusting my teammates.
There you go.
My teammates are on a very short leash. And if they fuck up, it's like, okay, can't trust them. Time to do what I need to do.
Right.
And if there's a way that I can involve them in doing what I need to do, okay. But it's like, okay, it's time for me to take control. Like it's time for me to win. And if what's necessary is to go around and lift people up, then I can do that a little bit. But start from the place of not trusting. Start from the place of like, they just don't care as much as I do. Like they don't take this as seriously as I do. So I should be the one who's like making things happen right now.
Mhm.
Also,
Mhm.
so it's the skill piece too. Like they're coming. Like I'm going back to sports too, but I'm kind of getting abstract because this is how I approach any group situation.
Mhm.
It's like I'm going to come at things like with a confidence in my skill set and kind of knowing
Yeah.
what I'm bringing to the table.
Mhm.
And I know that if things aren't going well in the group, I can pull on that and compensate for everyone else's problems
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
get whatever needs to be done.
Yeah.
And like I really feel that way. And it's like just let me take over and we'll make things happen. We'll get the job done right.
Mhm.
And it's like as soon as things go wrong, it's like, okay, yeah, me time. Not let's go around and kind of rally the troops.
Okay. That's
Yeah.
like a massive distinction. Like
Yeah, huge.
that's a massive one. Because I don't relate to what you just said. I mean, I relate I guess I would, if it really came down to it, I would want to be the kind of person that trusts myself with the final shot of the game, but my instinct would be to get everyone to like rally, and like to facilitate a team play.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like to think, it's situational. Like, yeah, if there needs to be a team play, let's make a team play.
Sure.
But if making a team play is just making a team play, no.
Mhm.
Let's make sure the person who like can make the shot or like knows they can make the shot, because like confidence actually matters a ton in
Right.
those moments.
Right.
Give them the ball, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah. But
Wow.
yeah, it seems like a big distinction is like I just come to situations, groups, come at people just starting from distrust and starting from feeling that like, I mean, I don't want to say that I'm better, but basically that, but coming from
Yeah.
like, okay,
Yeah.
like, yeah, distrust, skepticism, and, there's some room for it to be proven to me that you are trustworthy and that you can meet my standards. But the assumption is no.
Right.
And I don't experience any willingness to lower my standards.
Oh, there you go.
I think that's part of it. Like I have very high standards for myself, relative, like they're just normal to me, but I assume, relative to other people, they're high.
Mhm.
And I just can't help but hold other people to those standards. It just feels totally like total self-abandonment to shirk on that in some way.
Right.
So that creates a lot of, disappointment, a lot of frustration,
Yeah.
and alienation.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, and your reflex is to, like, if someone disappoints you, just to isolate. It's like, okay, well, I'll just do this myself, as opposed to reach for a connection.
Yeah.
That's a pretty big distinction.
Yeah.
And actually, it gets to something that I was experiencing as I was grappling
We
with.
can go back to I think we're in a good place, but if you want to go back to your two-wing processing, we can do that.
Yeah, actually, I was
yeah.
going to transition there because that's a pretty
Okay.
good way to go, or it's a good transition point, because one of the things that helped me cement the fact that I have a two-wing is I started noticing all the ways that, well, let's see. At the time that I was processing the possibility of having a two-wing, a bunch of very big relational explosions happened in my life, like with my brother, with some of the Enneagram crew, with an ex-girlfriend, and it's just like in a bunch of different areas in my life, shit went down socially. And my emotional reaction was basically the same across the board, which was I found myself in this indignant place of like, motherfucker, like you don't realize what I've done for you.
Yeah. Okay.
And as soon as I noticed that, I was like, oh shit, I have a two-wing. And it was very embarrassing. But it was embarrassing in the like, oh my god, I can't believe I didn't see this before, way that the Enneagram is supposed to be embarrassing. Like it really,
Right.
and it was very painful actually to realize. And the other thing, what was so painful about it was I realized that I had been unconsciously in this pattern of always never assuming or trusting that other people will come towards me. I'm always making moves to go towards other people, and experiencing basically, I have to keep doing that. Otherwise, if I don't, then I'll just be isolated and won't ever be connected to people. People won't want to connect to me.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a really painful thing to realize, that I was kind of masking that fear with this habit of going towards people and making relational offerings, or making myself available to people, or being nice to people, or being there for people in certain ways, or making the first step in a working relationship or whatever. And yeah, so literally in every one of these places, I started seeing ways that I was doing that. And that was probably, I mean, I think that was like why it took me a long time to even just start to integrate the truth of having a two-wing into my identity, because it was so painful.
Sure.
It just, you know what I mean? It just hurt a lot. It hurt really bad to like face that stuff.
Yeah.
But anyway, so back to the transition point. It's like, you don't experience that. the experience of like making those relational moves where you're going towards people.
Not naturally.
Because it seems like your default is to basically be more isolated, or to let people come towards you, or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, definitely more separate. Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's the whole thing of, wanting to, the four wing adding to this kind of specificity, and, wanting to be exceptional, great, whatever. It's like there's a push-pull of feeling like that's something that's going to somehow automatically create some sense of connectedness or something like that, right? And also a sense that, like part of that, one of the costs of that is just alienation from other people. And it's just something I got to live with. But yeah, I definitely feel some pain around that, where it feels like people won't come to me. But it's not that they won't come to me like for support or something like that. It's more of just like they won't come to me at all, because like I'm not really making myself available as a person or something like that.
Yeah.
Or I'm just not willing or able to interact on a more like personal level, kind of come down from wherever high place that I'm situating myself in.
So why did you become a therapist?
Long story. I feel like it would be a lot to get into.
It would. Okay.
in this. So maybe we shouldn't get into it. But it's a good question. Yeah.
The spirit of that question is like, well, maybe it's obvious, but I'll just say it. It's like,
No, I can answer that question. Yeah, I feel like there's a way I can answer it that feels workable.
Okay.
Okay.
Sure. Or you can take it wherever you want also.
Yeah. I think I do have a belief that people can like change and people can be better. A pretty deeply held belief about that. And I feel like something about me is that I appreciate how much people can change and improve in a way that feels exceptional to me. Yeah, something about seeing people's potential, but also having some belief in people that can be hard to admit to. And feeling like, I don't really know how to put it other than like, I just really feel like people can like be better and do better. Like that's just something that I just believe really deeply. And I feel like, I guess that's it. Yeah. I just like, I really believe in that. And I feel like, I've experienced myself like develop and improve so much as a person through, my own belief in that, and through like doing stuff like therapy. So I don't know. It feels important to kind of live that ideal or something like that. Yeah.
I'm fascinated because my experience of you is that you approach your work with the kind of commitment to excellence that is characteristic of 3, and especially 3 and 4, in that kind of like a untouchable excellence kind of way. And you're extremely well read, and it seems to come from a place of genuine curiosity for you. Like you actually love the material,
Do love the material. Yeah.
Yeah. But the interfacing of like you with another person, being through the 4 wing is a really interesting thing for me, because it's like, how do you do it without that 2-piece?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Or why, actually? I guess you answered
why.
why.
The 2-piece.
Yeah.
I think a big part, like the 4-wing part of it, is just like wanting to have real conversations.
Okay.
Right.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think for me, wanting to have a real conversation in an environment that feels controlled, in an environment where it feels like I'm in charge,
Okay.
more or less.
Right.
And I think there's also, there's a sense of safety, I think, in that, where it feels like, I can have like a really emotionally intense, rich interaction without having to be that vulnerable myself.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I'm in that role.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something about the setup that makes experiencing that kind of connection and that kind of like emotional stuff, not just tolerable, but like really like compelling,
Mm-hmm.
really, just really enlivening to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess it just feels like, probably for me and just in general, like that kind of dynamic, that kind of relationship is just so elusive.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a place where I can kind of have some control over it, offer it.
Yeah.
I don't know. That feels good to me. But I think there's other more like specific stuff that's probably not worth getting into. But I feel like that's the gist of it.
Okay.
And I do think part of it is like the 9-wing-1 play area thing too. Just like therapy, psychology, philosophy, that, that stuff all just feels like cool,
Totally. I relate
it's just,
to that.
it's just like, it just feels kind of natural to like get deep into thinking about the mind, thinking about emotions, getting really abstract about everything, including people. And but I do think the piece about being in this really vulnerable space, but not having to be that vulnerable myself. I mean, I'm very vulnerable, but could be worse. I think that goes a long way for me.
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
Where are you at right now?
I don't know. I'm good. Where are you?
Yeah, good. I want to check.
I'm just trying to wrap my mind around like this being on the Big Hormone Enneagram podcast. It's kind of like, because it feels like I'm talking to you. It feels like I'm on your show.
Right.
And you're kind of doing the host thing. Like you're kind of doing
I know.
That's
part of it. That's actually, well, I'm glad you just named that, because I was thinking it, but I didn't want to name it, because that would be me doing more of the host thing. But I was like wondering, I mean, that's funny how we just fell into that dynamic.
Yeah. I guess it makes sense. Yeah.
I guess it makes sense. Yeah.
That's what's going to happen. Yeah.
Okay. This processing negativity thing is interesting to me, because I actually experience myself as, I actually experience myself as a person that is very sensitive to like toxic positivity, or when a person is being positive in a way that isn't actually resonating with themselves. And I find that incredibly frustrating. And part of what took me so long to let go of having a 4-wing, and I still don't actually know where to place this in terms of my typing, is like I experience a lot of frustration with attunement, gaze, that whole thing, or when a person isn't actually being themselves, or like if I have for example, not to pick on 7s, but like when I notice my 7 friends doing that thing where it's like a cognitive gratitude about something that's not actually connected to their emotional experience. They're just kind of like asserting a mental frame of gratitude or something. I'm just like, that annoys the shit out of me, or when 9s or 3, just when anybody is painting a rosier view of the situation than it actually is, that really does bother me. And so I don't know I don't have a way to compare my subjective experience to your subjective experience. But I don't know where else to place that other than kind of 4ness within the Enneagram.
4ness,
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Or just being a heart type, just being sensitive to gaze and authenticity, and how people are or are not being themselves.
I guess that's the lines that I would think about it along, because it feels like there's a sensitivity around, who can I have a heart connection with?
Yes.
And a sensitivity to around like, okay, what are the openings? What are the blockages around that?
Mm-hmm. Like apparently in my typing, if I'm a 3 with a 2-wing, it's like I have all 3 positive, quote unquote positive or outlook types. And so that was like a thing that I was really struggling with to understand how that could be true. Given how salient frustration is in my inner experience.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like it's frustration in like the enneagrammatic sense, or there's kind of a different texture to it?
Well, this is what started me thinking about frustration being the root of all three object relations. And so maybe there's a distinction between frustration as like a type versus frustration as the experience that kicks off any one of the three object relational patterns. Like I experience an attunement miss, or it's like a gaze miss or something like that, and then my attachment pattern and two-wing rejection pattern kicks in.
Right.
But I don't experience myself doing the separate for dismiss everything kind of a thing. Although this is the thing. Sometimes I do. Like, one of the things that frustrates me more than anything else is when, for example, a movie comes out and it's badly written, especially if it's like a sequel to something that I really liked.
The Predator show was terribly written. That was
the what?
That was upsetting me. The Predator show.
It was.
It was terrible.
That's funny. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I used to pin that on my
aesthetic speaks, yeah.
I used to pin that on my forewing, but it's not. If that's not true, then yeah.
It feels like there's an instinctual piece to it, right? It feels like maybe a lot of that is your social instinct being frustrated.
I think so,
right?
And also that's definitely true. I also think that,
and that's the core of frustration. Like it's the instinctual frustration, right?
Right.
It's whatever your dominant instinct being frustrated, not gratified, feeling like.
Yeah, it feels like when I can see that. Just to give you an example, for example, I thought Doctor Strange was a total piece of shit movie. And there's many I could choose, but this one was particularly shitty because, so like you have this premise of a person. The character of Doctor Strange he's like a world famous neurosurgeon, and he's also an asshole, but he's the best there is. And then he gets into a wreck in the beginning of the movie, and his hands are destroyed, and so he can't do surgery anymore. So the premise of the movie is that he's now set up for a massive identity crisis. Who am I now without this skill? And he doesn't accept his fate, and he tries to find a way to heal himself, but he's the only surgeon who potentially could have done it. Now his hands are broken. So he finds the only other person who healed from an injury like this, and he's like, we got to visit this spiritual ashram in India. So he's like, okay, so he goes to the ashram in India. He goes to the ashram, and then the person there, basically, he's like, he shows up like a dick, and he's all skeptical of her spiritual magic and stuff like that. And she, the leader of the ashram, kicks him out. She shows him the power, and he sees, and then she kicks him out. And then he is devastated. He's banging at the door. He's like, okay, I see. Let me in. And what you think the movie's about to be is this dickhead motherfucker is going to have to walk the streets of India and actually confront himself. He's going to have to go on a personal journey, to like a hero's journey, Instead, what happens is the ashram's second in command person comes over and is like, hey, remember that like guy who's going to destroy the universe? Well, it'd be really useful to have another guy like this around. And the head of the ashram was like, oh yeah, you're right. And then they just let him back in. And then 2 minutes later, he has all the superpowers.
Huh.
So there's no sense of taking care of like the growth of the character,
Taking care of the growth of the character.
Yeah.
Yes.
And like the arc of the character, So anyway, I used to pin my frustration about shit like that on a forewing, but I don't know. Maybe do you have any insight about that, or how that fits in? I guess it's social. It is definitely social.
I mean, what you just said was like taking the movie didn't take care of the growth of the character. It feels like the movie didn't give the 3-wing2 treatment to the character of showing and facilitating their process of growing.
Which would necessarily mean, like, I wanted to see him suffer. I wanted to see him consciously suffer, and then go through a process of remorse and meaningful and real transformation. And
but it feels like it's an investment in his transformation, more than wanting to see him suffer.
Yes, that's true. That's good. Okay, that's very good. Do you get frustrated by shit like that? Or do you experience what I'm experiencing?
Mm, you're giving a very specific example,
I know, yeah.
right?
I like.
But
I guess
I definitely
well, yeah.
get frustrated with consuming art.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. I think whether I like something or not is kind of, I don't want to say it's binary, but it's just, I don't know. It is kind of black or white. It's just like I either like it or I don't. And sure, I could give a whole critique on why I don't like it, but I'd rather not. And I don't feel like a need to get that specific about it.
I
or
see.
something like that. Like if something's badly written, just be like, it's badly written. Okay, whatever. I hate it. Moving
That's
on.
good. Yeah, there's not like as much of there's more of a dispassionate dismissal.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Yeah, I don't feel that bothered by it. Yeah, I guess sometimes like I'll get my expectations up for something, I guess. But usually I just feel like, yeah, almost everything's shit. This is too. So cool.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a
I
maybe
think
like
sometimes it feels like, okay, this could have been done better. You know what I mean? Like it could have been, they could have done a better job with it.
Yeah.
I guess that's something that I experience. But yeah, getting into the nuances of the story and kind of what the arc could have been and how a character's journey might have looked. Yeah, I feel like it doesn't get that. It just doesn't get that personal. You know what I mean? Like I just don't get very invested in characters. Guess.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Yeah, I guess I'm seeing this in a slightly new way. I mean, partly what you're saying about the clean cutoff from bad art. It's just like, well, that's trash. Whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do have a sense of like if only they hired a good writer or whatever, then like this movie could have been like I hold the hope of or like a sense of the possibility of what it could have been. Yeah, it's not I don't accept as I have a hard time just accepting that okay, that was a shit movie and that's the way the world is. Sometimes shit is made.
Sometimes shit is made. Yeah. And I think part of it's like, yeah, that was shit and there's a lot of disappointment of like, yeah, like they could have done better. Like it's not it shouldn't be that hard to make this good.
Right. Right. Yeah. But yeah, that was a big piece of resistance, I would say, to like accepting a twoing was things like that. And I have my relationship with movies and writing in particular is like where I have the most heat, and that was like where I was experiencing like how could it be that I have a twoing and no four in my typing if that's true about my inner experience.
Yeah. I mean, social self-present 911 is it's a pretty critical combination. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a combination with aesthetic standards.
Yeah. Well, okay, interesting.
Yeah, there was something. Oh, how are you both now observing the contrast in aesthetic seriousness and frustration in each other?
You got some on that one?
Well, it seems like what's coming from that is it seems like the level of aesthetic seriousness seems similar, if anything, but the kind of the response to it varies. I mean, I think, perceiving and judging things on an aesthetic level is just a huge part of my personality. And that feels like if I don't like something aesthetically, it's just like, that's enough reason for me to just totally part with it.
What does the word aesthetic mean to you?
Well, I think aesthetic relates to image, right? It's just, in some ways, I think aesthetic like equates with Enneagram image. And it's like, aesthetics. It's kind of just like looking at something from an image level. I have to think about that. That's a huge philosophical question.
Yeah. So Emeka put some questions for us. One of which is, how are you both now observing the contrast in aesthetic seriousness and frustration in each other? And I don't quite understand this phrase, aesthetic seriousness. Do you have
I'm not sure.
do you know what he's
either.
referring to? Okay.
Yeah. Probably just more of a sensitivity into how things look.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe just as simple as that.
Okay. That's pretty interesting because my like reaching to understand that phrase, I think, is also indicative of a twoing as opposed to a fourwing.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Pretty intuitive to me. Yeah.
Because I think like, I don't experience a lot of just like a disgust reaction to, I don't know, anything is pretty distant for me. I mean, like something has to be like really intensely disgusting for me for that to really register, or at least for it to be like the first reaction, you know? Like even if I don't like something maybe aesthetically right up front, I tend to be reaching for what I could appreciate about it, you know, or like what I'm like trying to see into its layers or depths to see like what's the essence of this thing that actually, because I guess actually here's a way to put it is like I have maybe a fundamental tenet of my like philosophical orientation that is like there's something that I can appreciate about anything, you know, if I really see it all the way to its center,
right,
you know, that includes like a person or whatever,
right,
and the loyalty to that fundamental tenet, I mean, that's an a priori assumption, right? And it's like there's no one who can kind of not convince me otherwise because it's just like a basic orientation, you know? And I guess that feels too-ish.
Yeah, it does. It feels like approaching things with a certain level of like generosity, right? And being willing to like put in the generosity, put in the effort to like understand things on their own terms.
Yeah, there is an effort associated with it.
Yeah.
Like there are people that I don't immediately like, but and just out of a sheer sense of efficiency, I mean, so I don't like make the effort to like connect to everyone or like to see their depths or but like whenever a person's in front of me and like I'm like, okay, here's this person, I know that I can always summon myself to see something like precious about them. You know?
Yeah. It's not with being stuck with a person. Yeah, it's not like that. It's kind of like suffer through it. Like there's little to no hope in there being any kind of room for shifting things in a way that's more interesting or connective or whatever. In a way that's like more like genuine, right? Like I can make things more interesting and just being kind of like provocative and trollish or something like that, but trying to make it like more genuinely connective or something like that, or like making the effort to like appreciate someone doesn't come naturally. It's like the prey thing, like it just takes a leap to get there.
Right.
Yeah.
I just had something and I thought it was good. What were we saying right before that?
You were saying like you have this a priori assumption of like seeing that like that there's good in everything.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. I wasn't always that way. This is another thing that I found myself really confused about as I was processing having Tuing, is that here's a good example. I was when I lived in St. Louis, I used to play piano at piano bars, and when I was hired to be the band leader in this club in St. Louis, and so there was a team of like 8 musicians, and when people didn't prepare for rehearsal, I was pissed, and I got a nickname from my teammates for that mode. They called it Rhinoceros Josh. It was like, and I'm pretty distant from that part of myself these days, but I was like really I don't know, mean might not be the right word, but like probably actually it is. It probably is the right word. I was really just insistent on a certain standard, you know, and like how dare you show up to rehearsal without having prepared? What are you even doing? You know? And when I discovered the Enneagram, it was in the context of a retreat that it was like a 3-day long kind of weekend where like a person kind of went through the Enneagram, and from the point of view of like a very 3-wing-2 kind of redemptive spiritual point of view, you know? And it woke something up in me that maybe had been dormant or whatever, but it woke up this possibility in me that I could actually see and love people for their essence as opposed to their performance. And that was a radical shift for me. And it was so only after that did I start actually adopting this philosophy of like, there's something about anyone I can appreciate. But before that, I used to judge people very harshly, you know, all the time. I was super judgmental. You know, I love judging people, you know, back in the day. I like, and just so this is I'm not trying to convince myself back into having a 4-wing, but I am confused about I think that there is some element of how do we account for that kind of a developmental experience? In like if I was a 3-wing 2 back then and I'm still now, then what happened? Or where was my 2-ness then? Or how did it show up?
You're saying this is something that the judgmental stuff happened around it happened around people typically.
Yeah.
And people who you were in like relationships with that involved some kind of task or something like that.
Yeah.
Because it feels like part of the 3-wing 2 thing is like you're a 3, right? So you're trying to get stuff done. You have goals, you're trying to meet them.
Yeah.
And as a 3-wing 2, like you're trying to leverage relationships in order to meet the goal.
Oh, that's good. That's very good. Yeah, that's good.
And if people like if that's not working, I could see that creating a lot of pain.
Oh, that's excellent. Yeah. Yeah, there's a certain like I'm not giving up on my dependence on you. Like we are a team.
Yeah.
But it is like a profound disappointment. Like as a basketball player, you can take over the game and just like if you're Kobe Bryant, you can just score 50 points. But as a musician, you can't just like make the band better by yourself. Everyone actually is playing together. If the drummer sucks, the music's gonna sound shit. And I don't know. One other piece of my like confusion or reflection about this is I don't know. I'm kind of all over the place right now. What I was about to say was
you're having a typing crisis right now.
No, I don't think I'm not like I still think I'm a 3 with a 2-wing, but but there are elements of my past and like my intense like judgment and frustration towards people that I find that I still haven't found a way to understand from the point of view of being a 3 with a 2-wing. That's kind of what I'm unpacking here. I will say that
I do think there's something about people getting in the way of whatever you're trying to do. That feels in line with 3-wing 2.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say that, like the people that I have always had the most like aspirational, like the people that I felt the most inspired by or like that I wanted to model myself after when I was younger were often 3-wing 2s.
Same for me with 3-wing 4. Yeah.
What's that?
Same for me with 3-wing 4. Yeah. It was interesting about getting typed.
Sorry if you can hear this fucking dog. Yeah, they were always 3-wing 2s. I like there were always people who were like shiny and inspiring and that people really looked up to for their ability to like give the great speech that uplifted the room or like bring people together or just that kind of like big leader,
right?
Spotlight on them but like it's about all of us kind of energy that they were presenting, and I really tried to fashion my image in that way when I was younger, and so I would say that's very 3-wing 2. Yeah. Later in life, I've actually I'm obsessed with Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, all these people that are 3-wing 4s, and maybe that's
3-wing 4s are just inspirations. Like that's just what we do.
They're inspirational from like in a more cutting kind of like no bullshit. I'm gonna be excellent no matter fucking what.
Excellent.
Kind of,
like I'm just greatness at all costs.
Yeah. Right. And I find myself inspired by that.
It's got me thinking. Maybe it's annoying to do sports examples so much, but Tom Brady, I think he's a 3-wing 2.
Okay.
And he's like a huge brat, right?
Okay.
Like he'll have tantrums and all that. He'll get mad at his teammates. And he gets mad at them when they're not, like in football, you're dependent on your teammates to win. And he gets mad at them if they're not whatever on the same page as him. But what he's doing as the best NFL quarterback in the world is like he's uplifting his team to win. And like football compared to basketball, like football is like you're totally dependent on your team to win because it's 11 guys, whatever. Basketball, like you said, you can take over. But I think he's a good example of like a very frustration seeming 3-wing 2.
Interesting. Okay. I'm like totally unfamiliar with him. I mean, I know obviously who he is, but I don't know this game.
Right. Maybe she cut it. But yeah, just as a like counterexample to like
Interesting.
MJ
That'd
or
be
Kobe. Yeah.
Yeah,
He's
yeah,
like
no, that'd be
yeah.
good to check out,
too.
actually.
Was there something more to say about aesthetics, or that it seems like there's something really important to Emeka about that, but I don't really know what it is. Maybe it's something just about kind of the sensitivity that I have and kind of will express around aesthetics and the extreme like judgment and standards I have around them.
Yeah.
And I guess okay. It's part of my image to be really prickly about aesthetics, like wanting to come off as someone who has like taste and standards.
Oh, I see. Right.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
Uh,
Say more.
I think I just want to come off as like a sophisticated and tasteful person, and someone who's kind of like put in the time and the work to figure out what they like and what they don't like, to have created like a personal aesthetic that's in line with, my experience of myself at a deep level, and am going to like uphold that and uphold the standards I have for myself and my self presentation to everything else.
Yeah. I'm like checking back with myself if it's true. Like, it's not that I don't want people to think of me as having good taste, but let's see, my taste in things is not necessarily the thing that I'm like angling for people to see.
Yeah. I think I'm more identified with like what I like and what I don't like. And
yeah.
Like the whole object orientation of 3-wing4 versus 3-wing2. I think there's just it's just something that I care more about. Is like,
say more about object, or how are you using the word?
Like literally just like concrete objects. Just like more in tune with just like the aesthetic value of like objects in general and objects in my environment. And like stuff that I like and want to associate myself with. Like that's just something I care a lot about, and I probably care more about that than the people I associate with.
Wow.
Like it feels like I'll sacrifice potential connections with people in order to stay in whatever kind of like aesthetic universe that I've created for myself, both in my internal experience. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think the way that shows up with the social type is like, my social instinct is just going to pull from the collective whatever I think is cool. Whatever I want to associate myself with. Yeah. It's more about relating. It's like, it feels like my social instinct is geared towards a more abstract version of social, like a more symbolic.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
I do.
Like, it's not about people.
Yeah.
It's about kind of like this more like symbolic, kind of like, it's like seeing social. It's kind of like the world of like human creation as much as it is about like people, the human world. And for some reason, like where my instinct is geared is towards like the kind of like the creativity and the creative products and process of people over just like wanting to like be in relationship, which feels like a more reductive way of looking at the social instinct or something like that. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, and I'm struck by it a lot because all I want is to just connect with people. I mean, that's not all I want, but it's like it's a huge motivation for me, and to be with people, and I would say like this is maybe a strange way to put it, but it's like in my ego fantasy of my sense of maximum value, like it's like it's like a massive audience of people who love me and know me and who I know and who are like grateful to me, for something that I've like done, for that. But there's a connection that like a personal warmth that is like pervading the whole thing,
right. That's really interesting.
Interpersonal warmth.
Right.
And it sounds like it sounds like for you, you'd be happy just like sitting in a throne room with a bunch of trophies, you know?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of like like there's something about like Plato, the Republic, like the philosopher king.
Uh-huh.
Like that's kind of the ideal ruler. But yeah, I think it is something about that, just being like a king with his subjects. And yeah, kind of being in this position of authority
Mm-hmm.
without having to have any like real connections with the people.
Yes,
You know?
that sense of like social removal is so bizarre to me. So bizarre to me. I mean, that's like so distant from my psyche.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, it's like I want to pick the best of the lot to like make the art, play the games, write the books, and I want to associate with them, and I kind of want to encourage them to do what they do, and I want to kind of pull from that to whatever to continue to build and refine the kingdom and myself, but not trying to interact with the paupers.
Right. Yeah. Whereas, I mean, this is probably well, that's interesting because we have the same exact typing except for this wing difference.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I want to hang with the paupers. You know,
Yeah.
I'm not even comfortable with that word. You know, like because
I'm kind of uncomfortable with it too, but I think it is the right word. Yeah.
I see. Yeah. It is the right word for what we're.
It is the right word.
Yeah.
Paupers. That's good.
Yeah. Because I wouldn't want them to think that I see them that way. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Because the way that I see someone is like a huge thing for me. Like I want them to know that I see them in this as them or something like that. That's an important two-wing piece for me.
Yeah. It's kind of weird with the forming because I think there's some, you don't want to interact with the paupers, but you're also dependent on the paupers to see you as the king.
Yeah.
Right. And I think there's a lot of push and pull around that.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, what do you think?
I think you think that's good.
I think so. Yeah. Is there anything? Wait, is there any more texture around that last point? The push pull of the paupers and the.
I think there's just always this is the attachment type thing, right? There's just doubt about who do I want to attach to, right? And there's a part of me that wants to attach to the paupers and like find a way to connect to them in a way that feels real, right? And then there's another part that's like I don't want to associate myself with this.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I don't let me put it this way. I don't want to be successful without connection.
Right.
Like that's not interesting to me. You know,
Yeah.
And actually in some ways I would even say that I've held myself back from like actualizing certain projects because of my because I don't want to leave people behind, you know, or because I want to bring them with me, you know, I want it to be us doing it or something like that.
Yeah, it's not like that for me. It's just greatness at all costs. It just doesn't matter.
Right.
Doesn't matter what the consequences are. Doesn't matter what it takes. It just has to happen. And that's something that I felt my entire life. It's just like I just got to do this thing. I got to just build myself up, get good at what's meaningful to me. And I know that it's going to make me miss out on a lot of like potential connections. And not that it's going to make me miss out on connections, but that it's just going to alienate me from other people. Just that.
Right.
It's going to alienate me from other people. And yeah, it is going to kind of continue to restrict the amount of people who I can have in my circle, but it just feels like it just has to happen.
Right.
And there's a burden to that, I think.
Sure.
There's a burden and there's a pain to that, but it doesn't feel like there's much of an option around that.
What are you trying to be excellent in now? What's your your mountain that you're climbing or whatever?
I think something I've realized is that just it's not really anything specific at the end of the day. It's just there's just like some like platonic ideal of excellence that I'm trying to move towards.
Okay.
Right. And I think what I want to say is I just want to have like an excellent personality or something like that.
Sure.
I want to have a beautiful personality, an excellent personality. Right. And I just want to be able to exude that. But no, I want to be excellent at my work. I want to be excellent at like have like a really cultivated, excellent intellect. It's just so three to go down the list. So I kind of don't want to do that, but like, like I want to be.
I know. I've got one too. I know what you mean.
Down the list.
Yeah.
I don't know if I want to go down the list, but it's like, it's a whole list. Like I want to be a great, I want to be a great athlete who's really capable and like doing as much progress around that my entire life. Just the whole thing.
Well, our lists are probably similar in their expansiveness because of the Bermuda thing,
Right.
Like, like
That's
Kobe Bryant, for example, had hex affixes, and so was a lot more like just only basketball, period. Everything was about basketball. Yeah. I envy that, actually. I sometimes envy just having like a singular focus. I feel very diffuse among too many pursuits of excellence, which means I'm not doing any one thing
right
as well as I could be or something.
Yeah, I think I just see like me as the unifying thing, right? Like, I can do all these different things, but I don't feel like I need like a project, a specific project that I'm just pouring myself into. It's just like, no, I feel I'm into different things. That's just me. And it's all kind of feeding the same me. So I'm just going to roll with it. Right. And not, I think in the past, I felt a lot of pressure around that and being like, okay, I need to like, now like I'm doing sports, I'm getting like recruited by colleges. So like, I need to be like an athlete. That's just going to be my thing. And I'm going to make that my identity, but it just never, it never really held. So just having some flexibility around it feels really nice, honestly.
I have one other question for you that I was thinking about. Let me just, I'll just ask it point blank. Well, actually, I can't. Why am I hesitating? My experience of you is that you're a very sweet person, and I wonder if that's part of your self-image or not.
Being a sweet person. What do you say more about that? Like, what does that look like exactly?
Like let's see. Like in some of our group chats, for example, you've actually been more effusive or just more like pure in your expression of like love or admiration for people than I have, and I've actually found that really interesting. We're like you'll send a text like you guys have really beautiful minds, or you'll send like a really sweet birthday text to someone, like you'll say something that you really appreciate about them.
Yeah.
Whereas I'm a little more joking or something like that. I just found that fascinating because for all the obvious reasons, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how to situate that typologically, but maybe it's a three thing, hard thing, but it's just like, like I feel like I can really just see people. Yeah. And I feel like, I guess that's just the thing. It's like, I feel like I can see what's the best in people. I can see like what's special in people. And when the conditions are right, I can really pull on that.
Right.
And it's nice.
Yeah. I mean, it makes me think that there's like a hidden, latent, like when the conditions are right, your two-wing kind of like exists or something in the same way.
It feels that way. Yeah.
Yeah. Or like the complete heart center includes them all in some kind of way.
Yeah, I think so. I think, I think that's the other side of 3 and 4. It's like, it wants to lift people up, but it wants to be an inspiration. And this kind of, the focus on the self and I don't want to say the inquiry, but just like the attention directed towards the self that's like very specific and focused and granular. Yeah. Like to direct that towards other people. I think that is something that I want, that feels meaningful to me.
Right.
But it feels difficult to pull on that. It just feels difficult. It's kind of like with the birthday thing. It's like, okay, here's a moment. There's a moment here. I like I'm feeling something. I know I can pull on something here. So let's just see if I can get in there. And you're like, get in there.
And that's get in there meaning like in that place in yourself.
Yeah, get in the place in myself. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Right. I think it's harder to get in there in myself than it is to put it out there. I want to say.
That makes total sense to me.
Yeah.
Well, okay.
Okay. That's it.
All right.
All right, guys. Thank you for doing this.
All right. Yeah. Thanks for having us, man.
Yeah.
No problem. All right, guys.
Okay.
Later.
All right. Take it easy. Yep.
All right. Bye.